You're listening to the World Footy Net podcast. Welcome to the World Footy Net podcast. You can email us at podcast@worldfooty.net or alternatively, post your comments on the World Footy Net Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this segment of the World Footy Net podcast. This is episode 41, and we've been talking about the subject of open and closed leagues in the United States for the last few weeks. And there are those who are really for it, and then there are those who would like to see it but don't really think it's something that we can do right now in the United States. And on the line with us here, we're going to do a little Skype conference, and I have Ted Westervelt here from Soccer Reform. Ted, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Dre?
I'm doing pretty good. We got the incomparable Hooligan Broom, always a shy figure. How you doing, Hooligan?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right. All the way from Alaska, serving this country, Davin Lassiter. How you doing, Davin?
Not too bad. Staying warm.
Oh, well, that's good. Where you are, especially.
Yeah.
All right. And we have Neil Malone on the phone as well. Neil, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent, Andre. Thanks for having me.
All right, great. Great to have everybody here. Well, first, I wanted to kind of get into the subject on the surface and, dealing with whether it's possible or not. First, let's define what an open league is and what a closed league is. Does anybody want to just kind of give their opinion or their idea of what the two different types of leagues are?
I jump in on that. The closed leagues are the way American pro sports leagues work, almost without exception. They are leagues that are you generally buy your way into, and they are not exposed to traditional promotion relegation as seen in the soccer world. And open leagues are leagues that you can move through leagues based on the quality of your play and your performance in any given league season.
Okay, all right. Another question kind of related to that. The United States has always kind of leaned towards the closed league. In particular, I wanted to maybe ask Davin and Neil, is that more because of just a choice of the populace here, or is it that traditionally that's just the way we've done things, or do you have another idea about why America has chosen closed leagues as opposed to open?
Well, I think it's possibly a combination of both.
Okay.
I know for a fact MLS, they are, whether we like it or not, they're competing for the attention of people who don't like the sport at all, as strange as it might sound. Like you were saying, most people like sports that happen like playoffs. They watch drafts for hours and hours. They hate ties, and we all know that Americans don't like tie games. They're used to the idea of parity. They're used to the idea that your team's going to be good for a while, then you're going to be not so good, but then you're going to get your draft picks, and you might trade for a player here and trade there, and then you come back from the bottom, and they're just used to that. And I think part of that is that they've never really been exposed to anything else. Like I can imagine that a lot of people really have never heard of promotion and relegation because we all really grew up hearing about playoffs and these sort of things, and eighth seeds knocking off first seeds and so on, and upsets and that sort of thing. And it adds a bit of drama to the game, but my issue with the system is that it's always it makes it harder to reward the teams who've actually done good, especially in the NFL. Just always irritates me when a 15-1 team is sitting at home and an 8-8 team wins 3 or 4 games in the playoffs and they're the champs.
Yeah, something similar happened in the NASL last season under the same type of setup.
Yeah, and I think kind of what Devin was saying is, I think there's kind of a delicacy to the American soccer fan, or at least back when, the current MLS structure was formed, where, you worry about the American soccer fan being able to latch on to what might be a new concept for them, and be able to, for example, withstand a team that they root for being relegated for, in their eyes, whatever odd reason. And so I think, we get into this habit with other sports in the U.S. You play your season, you have the playoffs, and then you crown a champion. And I think, if I were to put myself in MLS's shoes back when the league started, I think that's maybe what they thought. How are we going to appeal to these fans, and how big of a risk is it to stray from what they're used to with other sports? And so I think that's why maybe you saw that as the chosen structure early on, and I think now it's and obviously we're talking about it. Now is the time where people are starting to warm up to the idea of change.
Right.
I
go ahead.
Let me interject here. It's a MLS came up with a bad model to begin with, if you ask me. I mean, I was working for TSI Soccer Corporation at the inception of MLS, and I thought to myself, in kind of what Davin was saying, and kind of a little bit to what Neil was saying, we're trying to convert fans to the sport. I mean, it's almost like, I'm a footy guy. I don't care who comes and knocks on my door and gives me free tickets and swag. I'm not going to see an NFL game. It's unappealing to me. It's fat men in tights. I don't want nothing to do with the game, and I think that's the problem. Rather than taking what little bit fractured league system we had at the time of MLS, rather than taking that and dumping that money into that infrastructure and building it from there, we went and created this whole new beast that people like me from the beginning, who have grown up with the game and don't like any other sports, I look at MLS and go, what? Where did they come from?
I would follow up on that.
And I should follow them. Why?
I would follow up on that. I would chime in right there, and I would say, going back to that ESPN polling they just recently did on soccer, and saying, in the under 24 demographic and the Latino demographic, soccer's number 2 to NFL right now. And I guess I would go out on a limb and say I assume most of those people understand promotion relegation. I mean, we're talking about it, maybe people haven't been exposed to it, and I think that gets a little undersold. I think a lot of people are exposed to it these days, and I think, just to chime in with Hooligan again there, it's MLS is spending a lot of time trying to convert fans from other sports, or to sort of cultivate a casual fan here, when I think we've got a pretty substantial base of guys like him that are ready for the real deal and are ready to join on this thing full force. And I think the U.S. men's national team is evidence of that, because you can see the one place that we do soccer like the rest of the world is the U.S. men's national team, and coincidentally they get the most attention among the American versions of soccer. So I think there's an authenticity gap, and I think filling it is going to be a pretty exciting thing.
Well, a follow-up question I have for you guys, and it's related to something that Neil said and Hooligan said. When the MLS started, why? And I understand that there was this thought to attract the American fan, trying to put the correct equation in to get the American fan. But this isn't the first time a closed league has been attempted. Even before the old NASL, there were numerous attempts at it. With the models that are around the world, why do you think we continued, even at the beginning of the MLS, to ignore what's already working elsewhere instead of trying to reinvent the wheel? Does anybody have a thought on that?
I would jump in really quickly there and just say I think there is a lot of tradition and a lot of reticence to challenge the traditional sports structure in the United States. I think MLS made a conscious decision too. the statistics are pretty clear that 100% of closed leagues of top flight clubs that don't limit their clubs fail. So I think MLS recognized this, and part of their business model was, well, since we can't accommodate unlimited teams, we're going to have to limit the teams. And I think that's the departure point that really hurts them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was just a miscue. I mean, I'm not one that would sit and yell conspiracy and this, that, and the other. I think soccer in this country, people don't understand the game. You get guys from other sports that are, soccer's an interest, but it's not their top interest. And it's viewed as a way of bringing something to the people that they want, but it's not the top money maker, maybe in their mind. So I just think it was this attitude of, we got to make this grandiose thing rather than starting a groundswell. You know, we had the A-League in existence, you know, with Seattle, and you know, the league names have changed with where Seattle and Portland and Atlanta at one time sat, so I might have that a little bit off. But, you know, that stuff was in existence before MLS. You know, why not all those MLS investors? Why wouldn't they dump money into teams that already existed and start the league from the ground up in that way, instead of dumping these franchises? You know, the MLS did a smart thing in downsizing at one point and getting those clubs out of Tampa and Miami that were faltering, and San Jose. It really doesn't make any sense to me why we go about it this way. And now we're having to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you made a good point. You have to look at the people that are ultimately in charge. You know, are the people that are in charge currently, are they actual soccer guys? Are they actual football guys? Or are they, businessmen that are, overanalyzing and trying to, take the least amount of risk with going what they know? And I mean, eventually, if this promotion relegation thing's going to work, the MLS needs to get on board with it, and that starts with the people from the top, understanding everything. So, why was this method chose originally? In my opinion, a lot of the forefathers of the MLS, so to speak, they may not have known any better, really.
Well, Neil, I understand what you're saying, and I don't want to argue the point with you. But at the same time, with you saying that, if they were smart businessmen, if they were smart investors, we have history in this country beginning in 1894, and it's not like it's hidden. Anyone can go find it, of closed leagues starting and closed leagues failing, and the federation failing to work with the leagues. And that's a lot of what's at fault here, where the federation should really be putting their foot down in some areas. They fail to do that, period. They don't say anything about it. To where if you go to any other country that has soccer, when the federation speaks, you listen, because they're the final word on whatever the subject may be. And here we don't have that. And for the supposed smart man that Galati is, that heads our federation, man, he makes some dumb decisions or chooses not to speak when he should. So, we can't say that there's not a proven track record of the closed league model in regards to this game failing, because it's in black and white.
I mean, you couldn't pick a riskier league model than the closed league model for soccer. I agree with Hooligan 100%. I mean, the statistics go back, and it's almost black and white, if not black and white. The model is proven, has failed over and over and over and over and over again. So
I guess from my standpoint, what I'm confused about, because the statistics are there. When you look at, you know, look at the average American soccer fan. They more of them are watching foreign leagues than they are MLS.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand. I think I get what Davin has educated me a lot on the average MLS fan and what they expect. And Neil brought up a good point earlier. And I think that when the MLS started, Davin made the statement that Americans don't like ties. Well, the powers that be in MLS knew that. And so what did they do in the beginning? They didn't have ties. They had shootout wins and losses.
Yeah.
But what did the fans do? They hated it. And they put pressure on the league to where it came more in the line of what the world was already doing. It's funny that all of these ideas, these new fangled ideas that MLS came up with, the clock that went down backwards and all this other stuff, have slowly been changing over to what everybody else has been doing forever.
I mean, you're hitting, Dre, on one of the key elements for me, which is soccer it's a very much of a global market, and NFL and Major League Baseball and our other pro sports simply have advantages to dictate quality and dictate other things to their leagues and to their clubs that MLS simply doesn't have. I mean, it's a true, open, crazy, brutal global market of unlimited clubs, and it's in existence, and there's something to be said for integrating as closely as possible to it.
Right, and I think that goes back to what Neil has said. I mean, when you look at who's at the top, what kind of experience in the game do they have? Are they coming from the NFL like Darren Garber, or are they coming from a legacy in the game? And I think one of the biggest and the most promising hires has been Jurgen Klinsmann for the men's national team.
Yeah.
Somebody who grew up with the game and you see him trying to talk to the youth coaches, the school coaches, and trying to get them all on the same page. And it's an uphill battle for him, but I applaud him for it. And I applaud that hiring, because I think that's the type of thing that can make a big difference. But this brings me to my next question. I'd like to open this up to everybody. Can the open league model work in the United States when you consider that the average American fan doesn't know what it is, in a sense, is not educated, didn't grow up with it, I guess is a better way to put it. Can it succeed? What's your guys' opinion?
I say yes. I think it'll take some time. I think because it is still pretty much a foreign concept, even though we know that there's a extensive history of the sport in this country, but your average person, not even talking about your average soccer fan, maybe not even your average sports fan, knows of this history. I think most people still think of soccer as, NASL, or they think of MLS. They're not so versed in history of like the A League and the sport, especially not teams in the earlier part of the 20th century or the 19th century. I think that's most average Americans' memory of the game is those main two times, MLS and then Pele coming over here and playing for a team in the 70s. That's what most people know the game is.
Davin, I'd jump in there and I'd say the first U.S. sport to promotion relegation is that's gonna be the gold mine. I mean, that sport is gonna see some real upticks in interest, because it's gonna be different than every other sport, and there's something to be said for that. And on the history part, I'd jump in and say, why isn't U.S. soccer jumping on that history? I mean, some of us have gone out and found it, and it's not like Hooligan said, it's not difficult to find, but you can't find it on the U.S. soccer website. Yeah. And it's just for me, it's a massive mismarketing opportunity. Massive.
Especially.
Agree.
Yeah, and especially. I didn't mean to cut you off, Davin. Excuse me.
No problem.
I just wanted to interject, especially when you consider the Open Cup right now. I mean,
exactly.
It's amazing. The fans are finding it now.
Yes.
And you see the excitement.
With virtually no help from the Federation.
And that was my point. Where's all the promotion for this competition? What is it, the second oldest cup competition on the planet?
Yep.
I think the English FA is the only FA Cup is the only thing that's older.
That is correct. And somebody somewhere is listening, because as I watch Fox Soccer Report every morning or afternoon, whenever it comes on, I have it to record. It's all over. Atlanta was on the TV this morning playing Seattle, Cal FC.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of those games that they're, you know, and a lot of them were just internet feed. But Fox Soccer is paying attention somewhere, because the Open Cup was all over. I think another thing we have to realize here is, you know, there's a lot of argument. I hear that, oh, you just want to look like the Europeans and this and that. With the promotion and relegation, our version of it is not going to look like the rest of the world's. Our country is simply too big to accommodate a straightforward promotion relegation as such. Ted and I have discussed it. I've discussed it with Dre. You're gonna have a top flight that can't afford to fly across the country at will, and then it's gonna have to be regionalized probably from there down. But you know, the first thing is with the sponsorships, we can't say, you know, people say, oh, you know, there's no money, the financial incentive. Well, watching Fox Soccer Report this morning, the newest major sponsor of Manchester United Football Club is Chevy, is General Motors. You know, Coca-Cola sponsors I believe the whole of League One over in England. American companies know what promotion relegation is. You know, these sponsors know what it is, because they're sponsoring teams within these leagues around the globe. You know, sports marketing is good marketing for them. It's a good buy.
Sponsors and owners. Sponsors and American owners, definitely.
Absolutely. So I don't think it's as much of a reach as even I like to think it is sometimes. I just don't think, you know, we're not jumping the shark here.
And also, I would go back, and I think it was Davin who said or Neil. It was Neil who said we got to bring MLS in on this. And I'm not 100% sure that we do. We do need a U.S. soccer sanction, and I think MLS is going to have to choose which way they want to go. But I don't know that, you know, MLS. You know, if the folks that support MLS are right, maybe there is a market for you know, a parity league in the form of MLS that kind of does its own thing and has an American audience that's used to NFL and Major League Baseball. But the fact is that they're leaving so much market share on the table for Europe and other leagues around the world that I think maybe there's room to do it both ways at once and kind of see which way works. And if MLS needs maybe a special sanction, okay. But maybe we have a pyramid alongside of it. I don't know that kind of competition is a bad thing.
Well, and that dovetails onto, I got two more questions for you guys, and I'll let you go. But the issue of investment, because I've heard a lot of people say that with promotion and relegation, it hurts investors, which I don't agree with. I think it actually opens up more opportunities for investors who are not as, you know, Rockefeller-ish as some others. But what are your opinions about the idea of open leagues? Is it better for investments or is it worse for investors? Monetary
first
investors.
First of all, Andre, I wanted to jump in actually. Just previous question. I just wanted to say I do think that promotion, relegation, and open leagues, you know, can work. But I agree with kind of what Ted and Hooligan were saying in regards to, you know, switching up the model a little bit. You know, in preparation for the podcast, I read a little bit about, you know, about what you said, Ted, and a couple of your proposed models and things. And, you know, that stuff's intriguing because, you know, I think the way it's structured now and everything, I don't know if that's completely in the cards. But I mean, you've got what is by all means a pretty impressive MLS fan base at this point, with a lot of the teams really growing and growing. And if you couple that with also possibly capturing all of the European soccer fans that maybe you didn't give the MLS a chance. Once you turn to promotion or relegation, I feel like they'd be in. And so I think that, if you were to make that move, I think the fan base would be tremendous. So I feel like it definitely could work, and I hope that it does. But in regards to the investments, I think it's tough. I think on one hand, you've got people in the lower leagues that would look at exactly that. It's an investment to possibly make on an even bigger scale if the team does well. So on one hand, you've got people that would jump in just on the chance that maybe it could grow into something bigger and better. On the other hand, it's tough to say how fragile the investors would be at the Major League Soccer level. If a top flight team were to drop down, I feel like in working in professional soccer before and kind of getting the gist of what sponsors feel like, I feel like that would be a little bit tough to convince them that it would be the right investment to make.
It definitely cuts both ways. The owner of the San Diego Flash told me that, I said, would you think it would quintuple your ability to raise capital if you had an open path to promotion? And he agreed. And that's in the lower divisions. I don't think it's tough for me to think of a way that opening a path to promotion doesn't enable clubs to just raise a ton more capital, and for the value of the brands of each one of those clubs to go up in a very significant way. And on the MLS side, the contrast is, I don't see anybody who has MLS's business model. There is no safer business model for an investor than the MLS business model. So it may not. It's very difficult to make an argument against a monopoly or a cartel when it comes to the safety of the investment. Still, it kind of cuts both ways and washes both ways, but you got to look at the entire game, and somebody's got to be there to step in and say, well, we have to care about MLS investors, sure, but we certainly want to care about investment in the lower divisions, and we want to try to encourage our teams to find and to reach the highest possible quality they can, and that's what got me going on this argument to start with.
Well, I think we have to consider too, if you go to foreign countries, a lot of these sponsors that invest money into these clubs, like anything, a contract is drawn up. And many of them have drawn up, it's encouragement not only to management to manage their club well and make smart decisions, but it's motivation for, the players as well. If, let's say Nike's their sponsor and they're getting free boots if they drop divisions, that sponsorship money may dry up right then and there, because that company may want to dump that money that they've been dumping in that club that got relegated into another club, to keep their name at the forefront. So it's motivation for smart management as well.
Right.
In order to keep that money coming in. Not only that, you got players like Beckham. I promise you, and I can't reveal exactly why I know things like this, but Adidas had something to do with David Beckham coming to the MLS. That's just Adidas sponsors Beckham. Beckham has his own line of clothing with the company and shoes. Not for nothing, business has a role.
And I would jump in one more. I would say one more thing here, and then I'll stop domineering the conversation. But there's a benefit here if I'm right, and if we're all basically, sounds like we all agree that promotion relegation would increase the popularity and interest in this game a lot. Even for MLS, if the interest in the game rises, that's going to rise. That's the value of each one of those MLS properties is going to rise too. So it's not as if there's not that silver lining too. I think you have to sort of factor that in. It's not all bad news for MLS, promotion relegation. That part, risk, yeah, there'll certainly be more risk. There'll certainly be more things. But those MLS properties, if there's a huge groundswell of support in U.S. club soccer, they're gonna feel that in the bank.
Yeah, and I just want to interject this. This just popped out on the news today. moving forward for the next 4 years, the League Cup in England shall be known as the Capital One Cup. What does that say? The U.S. Open Cup, if we drummed up more interest in it, it could be that's the Capital One Cup. Rather than having the Capital One Bowl.
And that brings...
We have the Capital One Cup. On a larger degree, everyone complains about American companies not keeping the money at home and sending it offshore. Well, guess what? Here's yet one more large financial institution sending that money offshore to sponsor this League Cup when they could be sponsoring it at home if the business model shifted slightly. I mean, we're not even talking about, really, in the grand scheme of things, huge adjustments here. We're talking about, slight turning of the screws here and there, and some advertising, and the U.S. Federation stepping up to do their job, which they are grossly negligent in.
Well, let me ask this as sort of our closing question here, and it has to do with what we just kind of talked about, investors and whatnot. The American soccer fan, do they take the game seriously? And what I mean by that, when they look at their own sport, if you have a fan of like us, the Atlanta Silverbacks or DC United for Davin and or whoever, when you look at your team, do you say this is the sport that I consider above the NFL, NBA, or MLB, or do you look at it personally, not the the news media or anybody like that, but personally, do you look at it as below that, or do you look at it as above that as far as your personal interests? Is anybody having a comment on that? Because I think that drives the decision of the U.S. Federation.
Yes, absolutely. I sorry to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
I see my team. I see my sport as more compelling than the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. I grew up baseball, football, basketball, and picked up soccer when I was nearly a teenager. And now, with a rare exception, soccer is the only thing I watch. It's definitely the only thing I watch as a neutral fan. I watch basketball mainly on the college level because I went to a D1 school at one point, and so I typically like to follow them sometimes. And typically that's only usually during like March Madness or something like that if they get in, just because I have some personal connection to them. But as far as neutral games and the big 2 or 3 sports in America, no, not anymore. I've never been supportive of the MLS structure, but because DC United is my childhood team, I've put up with it. I've put up with a lot of things I don't like, and I don't really have a deeper reason for it besides the fact that that's my team regardless. Same thing with Atlanta. With the recent issue with moving the game to Seattle, a lot of us were very upset about that decision, but just burning my Silverback jersey wouldn't have done much good, I don't think. So I'm just gonna. The other thing that pops up with me is that a good thing about MLS is that, like it or not, as far as the structure or other things you don't like about the league, it's helped to keep the sport visible here. And we've got more generations growing up, whether it's MLS or EPL or whatever the league is. They're growing up with the game. They're getting more familiar with the way the game works. And that's also from anything to games ending in ties and single table all the way to promotion and relegation. And I think it's just going to be an issue of the changing of the guard eventually. It's going to take some time, but I think that, it could be decades. But I think eventually we're going to have an open system because people have grown up with the game, and those people are going to be replacing the older people. They're going to be replacing the Galatis and the other people in the USSF. And I think a lot of us want to see the sport more open. We want to see our national teams do better as a result of it. We want to see the clubs that we support on the club level do better at it. And I just think it's just going to take time so that the old ways can, I guess, eventually die out. And I think it's going to happen. It can't last forever. It's not sustainable. There are too many people that are educated about the sport now for us to see this 30 or 40 years down the road, I believe. I don't think the sport is going.
Davin, can I ask you a quick question? MLS is definitely out there evangelizing on the closed league system, and they're going over. And Don Garber's spent a ton of time in Europe, and is really, I think they're making inroads with the world on, how much more profitable it would be if folks sort of went more towards the MLS model than stayed in this promotion relegation risky model where they're all kind of breaking even or losing money. Do you think they're going to have any success with that? With that evangelism, you think they're who's gonna win this battle in the end with the rest of the world?
I think in the end that the more traditional model will win. Why I say that is it's the same way that if you ever I don't know if you ever read Deadspin's website, but they'll have like what was it a couple of weeks ago, United and Chelsea played. I believe it was before some football game. I don't know. And then they had like a list of all the people who were tweeting about "This is America. We don't like soccer."
Yeah.
Blah blah blah.
Yeah, I saw that. I read that.
Right. So I think that sort of same insistence on tradition that Americans have, and which is why I think guys in MLS made the model the same way they did to try and work and compromise with those people who have those biases. I think with a sport like this, that's also going to come into play. It's not only an issue of being open or closed, it's also an issue of tradition, and that I think that more people overall, not just talking about America, trust the open system more than the closed system. So you're never going to get 100% people to agree on either side, but like I was saying, the sport's growing here. We're seeing and we're being educated on how the sport has worked and how well it's worked for years. And I tend to think that, as someone who supports a team that's maybe not in the Premier League and has that opportunity where their team can rise up and not always be in the same space, I think that's overall more compelling than a spot where you can, on one hand, where you can be near the bottom of the league and then be bailed out through a postseason, or on the other end, like with me being a DC United fan, where we had a lot of success in the beginning, but because of imposed parity, we had a dry spell, which may or may not would have happened in an open system. So it works both ways.
I totally agree.
Good stuff, Devin. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, for me, I'm a huge Arsenal supporter, and a lot of that is due to my heritage. But at the same time, of course, I support my local team. I'm a born Yank, so I'm going to support my local team, which is Silverbacks.
Even when they sell out their U.S. Open Cup games?
Yeah.
Yes.
Regardless of how mad I get, I feel like I know in that situation who to point my anger at, and it's not the guys on the field.
Right on.
I'm not going to make them suffer because of a management decision that them and pretty much nobody in the office, had anything to do with. One person made the decision without really consult. So I'm not
it's fair to say that you
suffer for that.
You'd follow your team through relegation, right?
I would follow my team through relegation, but the bigger thing for me is if the U.S. had promotion relegation, now granted I have, Arsenal's badge tattooed on my leg from my knee to my hip. I'm going to be Arsenal till I die. But would my focus almost completely would go from 80% Arsenal to 20% Silverbacks? Would that swap? Oh, hell yes, it would.
Yeah, I'm with you on
that.
I
would be 80% Atlanta, 20% Arsenal. Arsenal would be what I would catch, if I can look them up on the computer and check scores.
Same with me and United.
Yeah,
it would switch. Yeah.
It totally would, because it makes it
would become compelling. Yeah.
Because I know with the Silverbacks, whether we have a good year or a bad year, we're still in the NASL next year.
And compelling is the right word to use with this conversation at almost every turn. You can almost wear it out. It's just there's the way we're doing it right now is simply not compelling, and I think promotion relegation has a whole lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the American sports fan, I live and breathe soccer. It's my favorite sport. I work in soccer. I watch it outside of it, but at the same time, I'm a huge sports fan. I grew up in a town, Chicago, that has sports teams in every sport, and so I think a lot of American soccer fans, it's not like Europe where they when it's football season, they're an Arsenal fan. I mean, their attention is going towards so many different sports so many times, especially if you come from a big city with all these different teams. But I think that with that being said, I'm a Chicago Fire fan, but it's kind of like you guys said. I'll check the standings. I'll try to catch a game here and there. But at the end of the day, is it okay? Did it make the playoffs? Did they not make the playoffs? They're going to be in the MLS next year, just like you said. But I think that promotion relegation, if we were able to achieve that, you would then, it was kind of like Jay and Andre, you were saying, you would shift your attention from European soccer to your local club. I think a lot of people, you'd see them shift their attention from other sports going on at the same time as soccer to soccer.
Neil, one of MLS's big defenses is, this is all about quality. This has nothing to do with promotion relegation. And I think that I totally agree with you that I don't. It doesn't. There's something compelling about the promotion relegation piece of this, that if the Chicago Fire isn't as good as Inter Milan, it's still going to be almost as compelling as the Italian league. I mean, there's something there that I think it's difficult to quantify and get it out there, but this is not about quality in and of itself.
I think too, guys. I think that more than that, the quality thing, that's just like an argument that's off to the side. I think that what we discussed early on in the podcast has to do with the history. In England, we've had Faz on the show from London. Well, she's from Leicester now, but they passed down their football heritage from one generation to the next. There's nothing like that here. Davin picked it up as a young kid, and he's if he has kids or whatever, he's going to pass that DC United down to that generation. That's when it becomes a little bit more important than just a sport. It becomes a part of your family identity.
Well, which is another
and
thing.
So I think that takes time to. Yeah, go ahead.
And more to that, Dre. I mean, it's just like my 5-year-old child. And he did. We say prayers before he goes to bed at night. And he started doing this on his own. He says, "Thank you for Arsenal. Thank you for Silverbacks." And sometimes, just because he knows it gets under Daddy's skin, he says, even though Daddy doesn't like him, "Thank you for Chelsea."
Oh, I thought you were going to say thank you for Spurs.
No.
But isn't that also, well, I mean, that's what makes a difference to me, though. It's like I started following DC before I knew what promotion and relegation. This is when I started following DC almost simultaneously around the time that I started playing the game. So I knew nothing. All I had ever really known was, playoffs. Even though I was when I followed the NBA, I was a Supersonics fan, and I've hated the playoffs ever since 1994 when they lost in the first round to the Nuggets. I'm 13 or 14 years old, wondering, the Nuggets barely won more games than they lost. Why should they even be allowed to even try for the title? But I still never knew there was anything else. But for me, if DC wins, I'm happy. If they lose, I'm sad. That's whether it's open or closed or whatever it is. Now, yes, I would like it if DC was in the NASL and we were able to move up, that would be a greater trophy. But for me, there's nothing better to me, regardless of the structure of my team winning. That's just it.
Hey, Dre, let me throw this in there too. I think part of what defines American sports leagues is they tend to be able to define history, and I think you don't get a lot of any baseball history outside of baseball when you're talking to Major League Baseball folks, and you don't get a lot of that with MLS. And I think part of the whole promotion and relegation paradigm is there is a broader acceptance of history because it's not league centric like our sports are. And I think that's such a huge opportunity there to bring all of that history back together and actually have the incentive to put it all together and use it in a way that U.S. soccer is completely either incapable or unable, or however you want to say it. They're just unable to tap into that. And does that help MLS? Is that sort of a narrative MLS wants to push, that they were the first league or they were the best league? I don't know, but the whole promotion relegation thing takes that history out of the control of any one group who wants to write it.
Precisely, and I think that scares some people. MLS, I think, really does want to be perceived as the first and only.
Well, and why not? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's not as if it's I get called on lots of conspiracy theories, but of course you want to be. MLS wants to be the only soccer league that ever mattered in the United States. They want that mantle, and right now they have the power to do a lot to write that history, and I think that we're seeing the effects of that.
Hey, Ted, let me ask you something, Mr. Conspiracy Theorist. Are you wearing a tinfoil hat right now?
I'm tilting at windmills as we speak.
Yeah, we're all a little crazy one way or another.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to have to bring it to a close. We're a little bit over time, and we definitely can continue this conversation at a later date. And I encourage the audience out there, if you have an opinion one way or the other, we'd love to hear about it. You can send the message to podcast@worldfooty.net, and we look forward to continuing to discuss this the world game and keep the banner going. So, guys, I want to thank each and every one of you for your input, and we look forward to having you back on the show to talk about football in general.
Let's do this again. Let's
open
keep going.
leagues or otherwise.
Definitely keep going.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, and have a good day.
All right.